Well, Congressman, thank you so much for doing this. President Trump on Monday seemed to roll back the idea of declaring a national emergency to build a border wall on our southern border. Do you think that that was the right call?
Well, I questioned whether he had the authority to do it, and I'm glad that he decided not to do that. I think that Congress should appropriate the money, and I think that there is a battle going on now over whether we should appropriate. Frankly, I think the Democrats are wrong on this issue, and the idea that the president needs to declare a national emergency because there is a crisis on the border, it isn't a time-sensitive crisis, and so I think the president made the right move.
On Friday, some federal workers missed their first paychecks, but that didn't stop some of your Democratic colleagues from flocking to the beaches of Puerto Rico. Well, what do you think about their fun in the sun?
Well, they didn't invite me, so I wasn't very happy about that. But I think that you have to be sensitive to the fact that there are a lot of families of federal employees who are hurting right now. And it's unfortunate they are unintended victims of a battle that's going on over immigration and border security. And it's something that we need to be sensitive to as members of Congress. And so I didn't think that was appropriate. I didn't think it was really sensitive to those needs. The Democrats talk a really good game about how they care about these workers. They don't seem to demonstrate that very well.
What do you think would have happened if you or maybe some of your Republican colleagues had done the exact same thing? How do you think the media would have covered that?
Well, I think that, and especially how the media is covering President Trump now and taking every shot they can at him and putting people on consistently about how they are suffering as a result of this shutdown. I think the media definitely would have taken to task any Republicans that tried to vacation in the sun at a time that we have a snow day in D.C. and federal workers aren't getting paid.
What do you make of politicians in this town who are not only against building a border wall for our nation's security, but pretty much seem openly against the idea of protecting our nation's sovereignty?
Yeah, and I don't get that. It's really an interesting question. I think that we have a heroin epidemic right now in this country. We have thousands and thousands of overdoses that are occurring in my home state of Colorado. You can see the effects it's just devastating. That heroin isn't grown in the U.S. It's grown in areas south of the U.S. or overseas, and it comes into the U.S. in a lot of different ways. This isn't just a matter of immigration. This is really an issue that has to do with immigration and narcotics and terrorists. It's absolutely essential that we find a way to shut down that border and only let people into this country that we want in, and only let things into this country that we want. So I think the Democrats, this idea of having an open border, when we are a very generous society, we have problems in my home state in the areas of education and healthcare and criminal justice as a result of too many people that don't accept our culture, don't speak our language, don't share our values in our country. And it's a big problem, and I think that the Democrats, while they may gain politically marginally for what they're doing, I think in the long run they're going to pay a price for this.
As a former prosecutor, where have you seen the impacts of illegal aliens the most?
So when I was a prosecutor, we had obviously murder cases, we had DUIs, we had domestic violence. There are a number of areas that culturally we are different than rural areas of Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, El Salvador. The idea in those countries, in parts of those countries, that a 45-year-old man could marry a 12-year-old girl is just not something that is unacceptable, and it obviously is in this country. And so even if the families agree, it's against our laws, and our laws have to be respected. But there are some areas that we have a really tough time bringing people into our culture and getting them used to. Children in school, mandatory education is just not something that folks in rural areas south of our border accept, and it's mandatory in this country. So we saw a lot of a lot of issues in terms of bringing people into our culture and trying to make them part of our culture. And frankly, if they're not coming into this country illegally, we should not have to spend the money and the time and the effort to do that.
What do you say to those on the left or those in the media that call this a manufactured or a fake crisis?
Yeah, I think they need to go to the border and see just how bad this is. And I have to tell you, I lived it every day as a prosecutor, and I see it when I go home in Colorado. There are people out of work that want work, that are here legally, that are citizens, and they are undercut in their wages by illegal immigrants coming into the country, and that's wrong. There are people in this country that are victims of crime and they're victims because people that are in this country illegally have driven drunk or have done other things. We have a huge identity theft problem. And Amanda, it's kind of funny, but they don't take Ken Buck's name when they assume somebody's identity. They're ripping off the name of an Hispanic American. And I got calls just about every day at the DA's office that someone had used their a U.S. citizen's identity to get a job in Colorado, and this person now had to deal with the IRS and other areas. So identity theft is a huge problem that is caused by our lack of enforcement in the immigration laws.
What do you make of reports that the FBI launched an investigation in the wake of President Trump's firing of James Comey into whether or not this president is some sort of Manchurian candidate working on behalf of the Russian government?
So first of all, it's an unsubstantiated report. I cannot believe that the FBI, an agency that works in the executive branch for the President of the United States under the Department of Justice, would launch an investigation of somebody without any authority from the Department of Justice. I'm sorry, an investigation of a President of the United States without authority from the Department of Justice. If they did that, it's a rogue agency and it needs to be reined in. I think that the President of the United States has great latitude when he makes decisions concerning foreign policy, when he makes decisions concerning his relationship with foreign leaders. This president has imposed sanctions on Russia. He has made it very clear that Russia will not, under his watch, expand their territory like they did in the Ukraine under President Obama. I think there is such a double standard with the media and how they treat this president. A perfect example is when President Obama sat down with Medvedev and thought that they were off mic and it was a hot mic, and he said, well, after this election I'll have a lot more flexibility. You know, the media just covered that up and didn't want to talk about it. And yet with this president, there's all this speculation. There's no proof that the president made a side deal at all, but there's speculation that the FBI may have an open investigation. I find it really hard to believe that they did that, and I think it's irresponsible journalism for the New York Times to put that story out there.
You're on the Judiciary Committee. How should Republicans respond to how the Democrats are saying that they want to start launching all of these hearings to investigate Donald Trump's alleged collusion with Russia?
Yeah, I think that it's really important that the American people understand that Congress has oversight on the executive branch. That includes what happened during the campaign. If it's done fairly, I don't have a problem with looking at this administration, looking at the campaign. When we tried to do, when Republicans tried to examine some of the collusion allegations, we were told by Democrats that we were only trying to inhibit the prosecution from the special counsel. Now the Democrats feel free to do the same thing. I think they're trying to set up a run for president in 2020. I don't think they're truly trying to find the truth and let the American people know what the truth is.
Michael Cohen is set to testify next month. Many people are saying this might turn into some sort of Kavanaugh-like circus. What can we expect?
Great question. I don't trust a word that man says. There are lawyers that should never have had a law degree. There are lawyers that should never have practiced law. What he did for a living, I don't consider law. I consider it a travesty. And I think anything he says should be closely examined. And I think before the committee brings someone in who is incredible as a matter of law, that we should be very careful. So I don't know what to expect, other than the fact that the Democrats are going to say that he is credible. Republicans are going to say that he's not credible, and the American people are going to have to make up their minds.
in your book, Drain the Swamp, How Washington Corruption is Worse Than You Think, you walk through different ways in which the system is broken. In your time here in the Donald Trump administration era, has anything improved? And if so, what are some specifics?
I think there have been a number of improvements, and I think there's a long ways to go. I think that when you look at some of the rules that have been taken off the books and regulations that have been taken off the books, those are really important. The president promised to repeal 2 rules for every one that was enacted. At last count, I think it was over 20 rules that were repealed for every one that was enacted. So I think the president is moving in the right direction in terms of deregulating our society. We still spend far too much money. We have had a significant tax bill passed that has reduced, well, hasn't reduced revenue, but has reduced the increased rate of revenue to the government. We're actually getting record revenues into the government, but we're also having record deficits in the government. And so I think that that's part of draining the swamp, is to make sure that we live within our means. And I think this president takes that very seriously, but working with Congress is a real challenge in that regard.
In 2018, the midterms swung Colorado into the blue territory. Now, fellow Colorado Republicans like yourself have to pick a new leader. There's been rumors that you're going to be running for the GOP chair. Is that true? And if so, what's your strategy to win back the House in 2020?
So I am going to run for the Colorado State Chair. I think there are 2 kinds of politicians. There are people who see a problem and they run away. And there are people who see a problem and they run towards the problem and they want to solve the problem. And I'm going to run towards this problem and try to solve this problem. Colorado, the Democrat billionaires, in-state and out-of-state, spend a lot of money on Colorado and do their very best to make it blue. The interesting voting analysis in this last election, every single ballot measure, the conservative side won, the liberal side lost. Every single one of them. Every single candidate, the liberal side won, the conservative side lost. And so I think we're still a red state that is very confused when it comes to candidates. And I think the other side has done a much better job in messaging their candidates and attacking our candidates. And I think we have to realize the different ways that people are campaigning now, the different technologies they're using. We have to regain the trust of our donors in Colorado. And I'm looking forward to taking that job on.
Now, I want to ask about one of your Republican colleagues, Iowa Congressman Steve King. He's recently made some remarks that most people find very disagreeable. What do you have to say about those things?
Sure. I have to tell you, I think that white supremacists are vile. I think they are just an ugly part of our society, and it's an unfortunate thing. We have a freedom of speech, and we allow people to express their views. Some views are uglier than others. There are certainly views, racist views on the other side of the political spectrum also, and we need to be fair and make sure that we are calling people out on both sides of the political spectrum to do this. But I think it's unfortunate that he made those remarks. I think it's unfortunate that the Democrats are trying to make that stick to a much broader group of Republicans. But I think that it's clear that as Republicans, we need to say this isn't part of what we stand for. It's not part of what we're going to accept in our political party.
Do you have a final message to your new Republican leadership? I know things have changed a little bit. You guys have Nancy Pelosi as the leader now, but is there any sort of message overall to your fellow Republicans that you hope they can take headed into this new session?
Sure. I was actually in the minority of the minority. People ask me whether there's going to be a big change. Not for me. I was never in the majority in Congress. Being a conservative, I felt like the Republican Party here pretty much walked away from our conservative values, and it's why you see such great spending and other bills not getting passed. I think what is important now is that the Republican Party and the U.S. House of Representatives regain its brand, and that we tell the rest of the world we are going to spend less money. We hold the Democrats accountable, but we make sure that when we get in power again, that we're consistent with that message and that we're consistent in implementing what we've promised. We didn't do that, and I think that's part of the reason why we lost the trust of Republican voters and unaffiliated voters. I think there's a political philosophy in this town, and it's probably prevalent in other parts of America, that if Republicans just act like Democrat light, we can win. If we're just a little less liberal than the Democrats, we'll be successful. and it doesn't work. What we need to do is we need to loudly proclaim how proud we are about the solutions that conservatives come up with, and they are constitutional solutions. They are free market solutions. They are not the solutions of big government. And we walked away from our values in order to try to win another election. We got hammered. And we got hammered because we didn't clearly articulate what our brand was and how it was different than their brand.